Bună seara, doamnelor și domnilor! Vă mulțumim că sunteți alături de noi. Ascultați Radio AVFM, Vocea Europei.
Jó estét, hölgyeim és uraim! Köszönjük figyelmüket! Önök az a Voice of Europe Rádió Európa hangja műsorát hallgatják.
And, good evening ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to a Voice for Men radio, the Voice of Europe. A Voice for Men is the flagship of the men's rights movement. And this show is probably the only one at this point addressing the issues concerning men and boys at a European level. If you ever thought that there's something wrong regarding the state's approach to men and their issues, this is the best place to start. This is the place where feminism gets to be called out on its lies and propaganda, and the state is invited to get out of people's lives. Please consider visiting avoiceformen.com and see how the truth in action sounds like. We are here and we don't plan on leaving anytime soon. And now, Lucian Balsam shall bring us on today's topic.
And we're back. Greetings everyone, this is Lucian Volsan broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As usual, alongside with me is Herr Jon Gunnarsson broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer James Huff broadcasting from the United States. Hello there everyone, hi there Jon.
Good evening, how are you guys doing?
Well, I'm doing better now, but I've been having a huge amount of problems today trying to get my computer up and running, and I'm still not sure that I finally fixed it, so... But other than that, I'm doing quite well, actually. The weather has become more friendly as opposed to last week, and yeah, well... And I'm starting to saving. I started to save some money in order to buy a new motherboard for my computer. How about you?
I really can't complain. Things are going well here, and let's hope that your computer actually stays stable.
Yeah. How did you? How was the vacation? The little hiatus that we had.
Yeah, it was great. Very relaxing, and yeah, I had fun.
Yeah, and away from all the bullshit. I envy you, honestly. Okay, let's go to the news section because it's quite lengthy and we have a lot to talk about in this show.
Let's do it.
You are listening to AVFM Radio, the Voice of Europe. This is the news.
Okay, the first one comes from the Telegraph. Why I no longer hold doors open for women. I'm waiting in the playground for our daughter's primary school class to be let out at the end of the school day. We live in Scotland, where the new school year starts in mid-August. I can see the little kids all crushed together at the other side of the glass door, longing for the bell. When it rings, the door flies open under the impetus of unshackled desperation, and some boys and girls tumble out with thrashing knees and elbows. The class teacher then appears and orders the fleeing boys to get back inside. I can see her manhandling other boys and pushing them aside to let all the girls go first. She always does this. I have many times heard her say ladies first as she gets the boys to stand back. When we go to see this teacher for the first parents' contact evening of the year in October, I'm going to ask her if she might reconsider this policy. I shall say that our daughter and her girlfriends in the class are already vain and conceited and spoiled enough without having those narcissisms confirmed by some arbitrary rule that confirms they're naturally superior, or weaker, or more in need of special treatment. I want our daughters to be equal. That means boys must be equal too. If in everything. If it isn't a two-way street, then it's not equality. I will remind her of Doris Lessing's despair when she was in a class of 9 and 10-year-olds, the same age as our daughter, where the teacher was blaming the incidence of war on the innately violent nature of men. Lessing wrote, quote, "You could see the little girls fat with complacency and conceit while the boys sat there crumpled, apologizing for their existence, thinking this was going to be a pattern of their lives. I don't want this to be the picture of my daughter's schooling or any other part of their upbringing. I don't want our daughters to fear they have a natural, automatic right to be asked first by the waiter to say what they have chosen from the menu, nor to be served their food before the males at the table. I don't want them supposing that they will always, without question, have first choice of the best seats on the bus or the train, nor that anybody is going to get up, offer them their seat if all the others are full. I want them to be proud of their equality, not expecting deference. It's decades since I stopped automatically standing back to let women go first, though through a door, up the stairs, or whatever. I haven't held open a car door for a female under 70 or over 7 since Kate Millett first published Sexual Politics. Somebody, of course, has to go first through a door, but why shouldn't it be the person who gets there first? That one then holds the door open for the person who is next, and even for the people who are coming the other way. Gender doesn't come into it. If two people arrive at the door at the same time, somebody obviously has to stand back. But why should that invariably be the one with the Y chromosome? Why not some other arbitrary distinction? Why shouldn't be the one who is younger, or stronger, or happier, or hairier? Naturally, there are women whose majesty so shines that every knee must bow. I always let my mother-in-law go first, and if you knew my mother-in-law, so would you. If I met the Queen, I would probably allow her the same deference, and for the same reason, that they could take your head off with a single glance if you get on their wrong side. Those ladies do not, however, qualify for the only truly reasonable and morally defensible justification for a man to stand back for a woman, which is that you get to sneak a peek at their pins. Women, of course, know perfectly well that men are taking advantage of the position to have a gander at their behinds, which may even be why they enjoy going first. That unspoken sexual exchange is the only delight in this daft dance of courtly manners, and may be the only reason to continue with it. I presume, however, it is not the reason why the primary school teacher is instructing her class ladies first. And it has there a poll: do you hold doors open for women? 74.9% said yes, 25% said no. Anyway, the article goes a bit further, but let's get into this. Is this just manners? Is it really such a big issue? How do you see it?
I don't think it's a particularly important issue, but I mean, in principle, I do agree with him. I don't especially hold open doors for women. I mean, I hold open doors for people if they are coming behind me and are not unreasonably far away, but that's it. I do that regardless of whether it's a man or a woman. But I don't think they should give any sort of special deference to women there, but if you do, I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, but the article starts with a I presume real incident in the schools. Should that thing be tolerated in schools? Why not?
I mean, that is definitely going way too far. I mean, maybe if the teacher would tell the boys in sort of in a non-obligatory way that they should maybe wait for the girls, then I think I wouldn't really have much of a problem with it. But physically holding back the boys who are trying to run out there is just bullshit.
And not just that, but they already got out of the building and then putting them back into the building. Yeah. So that sounds childish, to be honest. And coming from a teacher, that's not really to be expected.
Just think of what this sort of message this sends to those boys. That you're not important. You just have to wait for the more important people to pass first before you can go.
For the superior sentience, yeah. And again, even from a pragmatic perspective, this is highly inefficient. I mean, you get let's say a fifth of the pupils, of the male pupils, already got out, and the issue is already done with them, and you go after them and put them back into the building, so that it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is actually happening or if it's some sort of exaggerated account here in this article, because that sounds like really stupid and really unreasonable. So I'm not sure if we can really trust this account.
Yeah, but, I don't know, it just seems inefficient. And expanding it a bit more is it really such? I don't know. I don't know how to put it. I mean, the problem that I have with this article is that it is written from an extreme perspective, and then 90% of the comments are written from the other extreme perspective. You know, as in the ultra chivalrous, gynocentric perspective. I don't know. I'm not really an egalitarian, so I don't believe in absolute treatment, absolutely equal treatment, especially in private matters. I mean, it's one thing, equality under the law is a great thing, but in private matters, and especially trivial private matters like this one, I'm not even sure it's a big issue to begin with, and worthy of a column in the Telegraph or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing about who gets served the food first in a restaurant. I mean, who the fuck cares? It's irrelevant. It's not a big deal. I mean, there's 100,000 gender issues that are more important than this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I frequently go to the restaurant, especially in the Sundays, with my girlfriend. And, the waiters at my favorite restaurant apply a very, very pragmatic criterion, which is whose food is ready first in the kitchen, you know? That's the person that gets served
very
first.
Very patriarchal to me.
Yeah.
It's far too logical and reasonable.
So,
could only have been devised by a man, that system.
Well, actually, it was devised by a man. I mean, most of the waiters are men, and all the chefs are men, because they don't want to oppress women and put them in the kitchen, so only men get to cook in my favorite restaurant. But anyway, so I'm not sure. I mean, some of the things that he brings up are just not stupid, but blatantly trivial, and I don't know. Is it really such a big problem that who gets to be served first at the restaurant, or what does it said here? If someone gets up in the bus to offer the seat to a lady, it's their business. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I can see the problem only if women expect that sort of treatment. If they get offended if you don't do it or something like that, then it's a problem. But as long as people are doing it voluntarily, I don't really care.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not convinced. Maybe it is the case in the UK or in, especially particularly in Scotland where this fellow lives. Maybe it is an issue there. I won't try to argue against that, but I'm not sure it's really a generalized phenomenon in many places of Europe where women really expect that and they get offended by it. The only instance that I encountered was with an older lady who felt offended that the youngsters didn't offer her a seat, and because she started being an asshole, then nobody offered her a seat until the end of the travel because she was an asshole. But other than that, I'm not sure that women really expect people to give them their seat. I'm not sure that's a generalized phenomenon or even a relevant phenomenon. I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I've never encountered that in Germany either.
Yeah,
like with older people, or maybe with a pregnant woman, then I guess I can understand it. But it just because someone is a woman, have never seen that really.
Yeah, but pregnancy is, it's a condition. It's pretty much the same as a crippled man. You offer a seat to that person because of their condition, not because of their sex. Yeah. I don't know. Just doesn't make sense to me. Okay. Enough with that because we have a longer article. Go ahead.
Okay. This is from the New York Times. And it's called Why Don't More Men Go Into Teaching? As Tommy Leaders, 22, approached college graduation last spring, his professors told him he would have no trouble getting hired. You're a guy teaching elementary, they said. Mr. Leaders, who earned his education degree from the University of Nebraska in June, started teaching 5th grade last month in Council Bluffs, Iowa. He's the only male teacher in the building. Across the country, teaching is an overwhelmingly female profession, and in fact has become more so over time. More than 3/4 of all teachers in kindergarten through high school are women, according to Education Department data, up from about 2/3 3 decades ago. The disparity is more pronounced in elementary and middle schools, where more than 80% of teachers are women. Educators, advocates, and lawmakers fight bitterly about tenure, academic standards, and the prevalence of testing. But one thing most sides tend to agree on is the importance of raising the status of teaching so the profession will attract the best candidates. A change in the gender imbalance could sway the way teaching is regarded. Jobs dominated by women pay less on average than those with higher proportions of men, and studies have shown that these careers tend to enjoy less prestige as well. Although teaching was once a career for men, by the time women began entering the workforce in large numbers in the 1960s, teaching, along with nursing, was one of the very few careers open to them. But despite inroads that women have made entering previously male-dominated fields, there has not been a corresponding flow of men into teaching and nursing. Quote, "We're not beyond having a cultural devaluation of women's work," said Philip N. Cohen, a sociologist at the University of Maryland. So that if a job is done primarily by women, people tend to believe it has less value. Although teachers have more time off
I doubt that, but anyway.
Yeah, he doesn't really offer any sort of argument for that or anything like that. Although teachers have more time off and at least for now better benefits and job security than many other professions, their pay has remained essentially stagnant since 1970 in inflation-adjusted terms. The median pay for an elementary school teacher is now about $40,000. According to Maria Fitzpatrick, an economist at Cornell University, who analyzed census data, women who work outside of teaching have seen their pay rise by about 25% since 1970, while average men's wages in non-teaching jobs have actually fallen, also in inflation-adjusted terms. Still, men can earn much more on average outside of teaching, while women's teaching salaries more closely match the average pay for women outside of education. Because they are still the primary caregivers in families, women may be more attracted to the profession than men, in part because they can work the same schedules as their children. Teachers can take a few years out of work to stay at home with babies or toddlers and return to the profession easily. Although if they do, their salaries may lag behind those who don't take time off. And although the recession caused many school districts to hand out pink slips, teachers generally have lower levels of unemployment than other college-educated Americans. With so few men currently in teaching, other men may be less inclined to view it as a desirable option. It will be less and less in their head that this is an occupation for males, said Richard M. Ingersoll, a professor of education and sociology at the University of Pennsylvania, who has analyzed education department data on the demographics of teaching. Quote, "There's a snowball effect. Of course, there are other reasons teaching may be devalued beyond the fact that so many women do it. After all, in countries like Finland and Singapore, where students tend to perform better on academic tests than students in the United States, teachers are more highly regarded despite the fact that the gender imbalance looks similar at the front of the classroom. In the United States, where 42% of high school teachers are men, high school educators do not enjoy a higher status than those in elementary school." Well, I guess that would be evidence against the hypothesis that it's women who hold back the pay and the regard that teachers are held in. But
shh, don't apply logic.
And they actually haven't offered any evidence for that thesis. So, but let's forget about logic for now. Teachers' unions argue that the swift adoption of new academic standards, the use of standardized tests to evaluate teachers' job performance, and efforts to overhaul tenure all make teaching a less attractive career for anyone. The reality of teaching right now is that it's always been a hard job, said Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, the nation's second largest teachers union. It's harder now than ever before, with less and less respect, she said. Deans of education departments lament the lack of men, but are not sure what to do about it. Susan H. Foreman, president of Teachers College at Columbia University, said she was puzzled by the persistent absence of men in elementary education programs, where women outnumber them 9-1. I do think it's a vicious cycle, she said. Women went into it without other options, and it was a low-status profession that was associated with women. The fact that it's now dominated by women inhibits the status from increasing. Simply recruiting more men into the profession is not likely to raise the quality of the teaching force. And at a time when teachers are nowhere near to representing the racial diversity of America's students, many educators argue that increasing the number of African American and Latino teachers is a higher priority than simply bringing more men into the job. Both Teach for America, the group that places high-achieving college graduates in lower-income schools for 2-year stints, and Teach.org, a newly formed partnership between the Department of Education and several companies, teachers' unions and other groups, have recently introduced initiatives aimed specifically at recruiting more racial minorities. Still, some educators say that boys, who tend to struggle in school more than girls, could use more male role models, or simply people who understand them, in the classroom. Some say the notion that boys need to be taught differently over men simply underscores gender stereotypes. Rafi Esquith, a 32-year veteran who teaches 5th grade at Hobart Boulevard Elementary School in Los Angeles, has written 2 books on teaching, hopes to show his students, a vast majority of whom come from poor families, quote, a guy who lives a different life than a lot of the male role models that they see. Other than that, he said, the value of a man in the classroom depends on the man, I think. Then again, some women may not be eager to open the profession to more men. Men who do become teachers tend to be promoted more quickly into senior administrative positions, said Christine L. Williams, a professor of sociology at the University of Texas, who has studied the so-called class escalator. Nearly half of all school principals are men. If educators are determined to get more men into classrooms, Professor Williams said, the best way would simply be to upgrade the conditions and pay of the job. And that, she said, would positively impact the job for women as well.
Well, at least it ends with a true sentence.
Yeah. That is most I can be said for this.
That is indeed a solution, even though I'm not really a fan of the term solution, but that really is a solution. You want a specific category of people who are leery of coming into there, but just raise the pay, raise the stakes, and that may or may not follow. Now,
but the thing about this is that this actually contradicts their central thesis, that it is the presence of women that determines low pay, whereas the alternative hypothesis, which I think is true, is that the low pay and bad conditions determines that fewer men want to do it, because men are more oriented towards pay than women are.
Yes. Now, let's make it a bit more Euro-specific, because even though most of the article applies almost ad literam to Europe as well, I guess, except the racialist claptrap, which is more or less irrelevant. I mean, I've never seen a program in Spain to attract more gypsy teachers or more Basque teachers or whatever the minority. No, I don't think that's not really a European thing. But the rest of it kind of applies, and I'm gonna pull the two politically incorrect facts here. One of them is that in modern education, then that's true both in Europe and in the US, it's the unions who get to decide almost everything. And I guess it's the only trade, or amongst the very few trades where the unions also decide the product, how it's manufactured, how it's sold, how it's which is in complete opposite of other places, other trades where the unions don't get to decide these kinds of things, where the unions only do what a union is supposed to do, which is collective bargaining of the pay and defending the genuine or the imaginary workers' rights. I mean, in education, however, the unions not only do they get a seat at the table, but they get the only seat at the table to decide how the product is manufactured and marketed, which I think it is dysfunctional. And it's also the other hate fact, which is essentially that men and women are essentially different in their career choices. And as you said, men are more oriented towards the pay. They don't really give a fuck if the work is not entirely fulfilling, whilst women prefer the work to be first and foremost more fulfilling, whatever that means, emotionally fulfilling, I guess, than to be better paid. And I have a few studies to prove that, 2 in my country, 2 in the UK, thanks to Mike Buchanan, who always digs up these kinds of things, which essentially every single one of them essentially said that women were interested in things such as is the bathroom clean, is the work environment friendly, and things of that nature, whilst for the men interviewed in the same studies, they were essentially how much is the pay, how much vacation days I get, and things of that nature. I mean, if the bathroom is clean didn't even come close into the top 10 things that men were asking about a new job. So, and I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing. I'm not making value judgments here. I'm just stating the facts. And considering this aspect, it kind of makes sense that men avoid it. Now, there is another issue, and that is that men essentially avoid the teaching in the, especially in the primary school or whatever, where the kids are under 15, because there is that thing which is a high risk of false allegations of sexual misconduct. And believe it or not, that's a huge risk.
I don't really know if that really plays such a big role in determining the numbers. I mean, I think it's a good reason to not teach elementary school, but I don't know if that's really the reason that's or one of the main reasons that's holding men from picking those jobs. I think men are just in general less interested in working with small children. I think that's the main reason.
Yeah, but men were more interested in working with the small children 50 years ago, or 60 years ago, and especially 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, but 100 years ago, in general, all teaching was much more male.
And it's also this hate fact, which was confirmed, including by the European Union. Now, of course, they keep it buried somewhere on the European Commission's website. They don't put it on the front page because, well, it's not really politically correct. And I'm not even sure if it's entirely true, but it sounds true. Maybe you can comment on it. There were several studies made by the European Union which essentially asserted, I'm not going to say proved, but it's asserted that women tend to disproportionately employ more women, whilst men tend to give a fuck far less about the sex of the person that they employ. Could that be, I mean, it allures to this, even this article, could that be one of the reasons why there is this, what they call a vicious circle, or never-ending cycle?
A snowball effect, I think they call it.
Snowball effect, yes.
I'm not sure. I've actually even heard about it being the opposite, that women are like less likely to hire or promote other women, but I'm not sure about that. So I don't know if that's a real thing, but if it is, then it could be an explanation for that snowball effect that they're talking about. Because in this article, they don't give any reason for why there's a snowball effect. They use that snowball effect to explain that there's not many men, but how do they know that? They just assert that there might be some sort of evidence for that, but it's really difficult to prove that, whether it's a snowball effect or whether men just don't like to do that kind of work.
Yeah, and I'm not sure either. Actually, I'm not sure. I'm convinced that it's a bad idea. That thing, we should get more minorities, and that's a higher priority than get more men. Now, quite frankly, these ways of targeting people based on anything else than their competence is bound to yield not so happy results. I mean, for instance, I would disagree even with a program that would say, let's have an affirmative action program for men in primary schools. I would disagree with that. I don't think that's a good idea. And this, in the same fashion, I don't agree with the idea of let's have some affirmative action to get more of a certain ethnicity or a certain race or whatever. What's that got to do with it? I mean, why? I mean, essentially you're skewing the process.
I guess sort of the thinking behind that is that that like male students, boys, are more likely to identify or to like a male teacher, and female students are more likely to like or identify with a female teacher. You need to offer like both male and female role models so that you have a sort of a balanced mix of role models in schools, and same for the different ethnicities. So I guess I can see sort of a minor case for that, especially when it comes to schools, because you have small children there who are easily impressionable, but I still think it's overall not a good idea.
Yeah, and it's also the fact that, and this is, I don't know if it's true in the US, but I know it's kind of true in Europe. Education in Europe is essentially a state monopoly altogether, up to and including university level, yes. And with that comes the very, very cringing aspect of bureaucratization. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and I have a few friends who are teachers, and when they showed me how the huge amount of papers that they must fill for several meaningless bullshit reports that the Ministry of Education requires, and now there's another layer. There's the Commission for Education of the European Union, who also gets some reports from almost all teachers of this club, this 28 nation club. I mean, you have to ask at one point, what am I in there to teach or to fill papers? Because there's almost a balance of it. I mean, it's 60% teaching, 40% doing bureaucracy, and I can understand why most men just wouldn't want to do that.
I'm not sure if that's really what's holding off men. Because you do find a lot of men who go into other sorts of government work where you have to do lots of bureaucracy, or I mean, even in the private sector, you do have to do lots of bureaucracy and compliance and so on. So I don't really think that's a major reason for the gender difference.
Yeah, well, speaking from a personal perspective, if I apply for a job in the let's call it the IRS, whatever, the equivalent of IRS in any country. If I apply for a job in there, I know what I am applying for, which is essentially doing paperwork all day long. But if I apply for a job as a teacher, I expect to teach most of the time, not sit behind the desk and fill tons of paperwork. I don't know, maybe I have a skewed perception in this. That could be true.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, even if people have that expectation that they don't expect there to be a lot of paperwork, that sort of actually works against your argument, because then, if your argument is that men don't like to do paperwork, then them underestimating the amount of paperwork would lead to more men in teaching, not less.
More men applying, but then when they discover the amount of the paperwork, they would say, no, fuck this shit, I'm out of here.
Okay, so we have to look if there's a lot of men who are quitting teaching. I don't know the numbers on that.
Yeah, okay, I see that nobody says anything in the chat room related to that. I guess it should be an ongoing discussion. I really don't know what the solution is besides the fact that, just increase the pay and increase the attractiveness of the job. That may bring more men in teaching, but other than that, I'm not sure there is a case for anything else. I mean,
I also don't think that that's necessarily a good idea to do. I just really don't know what the pay for teachers should be, because it is mostly a state monopoly. It's just impossible to tell what the price of the teaching wages should be.
Yes, and I was looking through some numbers, and they were analyzing. There was a feminist think tank in this country. They were analyzing that. They were also bemoaning the fact that but there's a lot of women and they were giving the same argument that because there's an overwhelmingly female environment, that's why it gets less pay or whatnot. But then they discovered that, at least they were honest about that. They discovered that in the private schools, there's still more women than men, but it's something like 60-40 instead of 90-10. And the only difference between the two is essentially the pay. And the private schools tend to pay better than the state schools, and that, I guess, kind of makes sense, because the private schools are fewer and there's a much bigger demand for them and whatnot. But yeah, I guess
they probably also have higher criteria for teachers.
Yeah, they do. They do, and they also have, different, not necessarily fewer, but different rules, which some parents favor, as opposed to the state schools. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Yep, that is also from me. And it's a piece from Austria, from the Courier, and it's called Inadmissible Women's Discount. The Eurothermen resorts in Upper Austria offer discounts to lure seniors into their relaxation temples. On the so-called Seniors Monday, a ticket for the full day costs €13 for women over 60 and for men over 65. One pensioner was particularly irate that he had to wait longer to take advantage of the lower price. The man saw himself as being disadvantaged compared to the female sex, and lodged a complaint with the Equality Commission in Vienna. The commission agreed with him. This had been a case of direct discrimination, they decided. Markus Achleitner, the boss of the Eurothermen resorts, which operates bar resorts in Bad Schallerbach, Bad Ischl, Bad Hall, is unperturbed by the commission's ruling. This is a voluntary social discount that is intended to alleviate the income disadvantages of women. He argues that women's active income and their pension income was 1/3 lower than that of men, so there had to be a social equalization. While the ÖBB and the Wiener Linien, ÖBB is the state-run train company for Austria, and Wiener Linien is the public transport. Like the public transport firm for Vienna, have adjusted their fares in the face of public pressure. The Eurothermen remain adamant. Quote, "Right now we intend to take our time and to think this through. This situation is regrettable for the ladies who have had more money at their disposal, who would have had more money at their disposal," Achleitner said. He denies doing this for financial reasons or as a marketing strategy. The reduced tickets only affected 2,500 people who were between 60 and 64. but time is running out for the Euro-Termin in just 2 months. Then a deadline which the Equality Commission has set will run out. If Achleitner hasn't acted by then, the pensioner who feels he has been discriminated against can sue. Furthermore, the Commission has demanded the following. On their website, the Euro-Termin have to, quote, include an easily visible and permanent notice about the existence of the Equal Treatment Law, and to point out explicitly that no one will be discriminated against based on sex, end quote. So far, Achleitner hasn't followed this suggestion either. So,
question. Does Austria has a similar law that most of Europe has, which is essentially women retire at 60, men at 65?
yes.
Okay, so their great problem is that some meaningless spa relaxation temple is doing exactly the same thing that the government is doing to the entire fucking nation.
Exactly.
Now, don't get me wrong, it is sex discrimination, no question about it. But I'm wondering which one is more important. I mean, at the end of the day, if Austria has the same law that most of Europe has, and you said it does...
I don't know if it's most of Europe. But
what?
I don't know if it's most of Europe, but quite a few European countries.
Well, Finland, Sweden, Poland very recently. I don't know about Germany.
Germany, it's the same. In Switzerland, it's different, but it's only for
yes.
1 year, I think.
Yeah, so
it's like 64 and 65
yeah, but
you
can count the countries in there are like 5 or 6 who have equal laws, and they're all minuscule population wise. So most of Europeans are subjected to the 60-65 law. But anyway, so essentially in Austria, women enjoy 15, 16, 17 years of pension on average, and men enjoy 8, 9 years of pension on average. Yeah, now I would guess that's a huge problem because it's taxpayer funded. Then that 62-year-old men have to pay 10 euros extra at some spa where they can choose not to go. People can't choose not to contribute to the public pension fund, but they can choose not to go to that particular spa.
Yeah, and it's especially bad because men already have a lower life expectancy, but they still have to pay just as much, and they get just as much as if they had the same life expectancy as women. So that
the pension system is the pension system as it is today in Austria and many other nations of Europe is essentially a subsidizing system. Men pay for women's pensions. It's just the truth. And I would guess that's a bigger issue of discrimination because it affects everyone and because it's taxpayer funded than that some spa, some relaxation temple decides to have different wages for different ages and sexes. I mean, yeah, it is discrimination, but is it really such a big issue that you have to have a court deciding and force them to alter their website? I'm not sure that's a good way forward. I'm not even sure it's that much of a big problem.
Yeah, that's sort of what the Austrians, the Austrian government is surprised by, that this Equality Commission, a lot of the stuff they actually handle now is discrimination against men. This was sort of a feminist policy. It was supposed to be just to deal with discrimination against women, but the legislation is gender neutral, so now they actually get lots and lots of complaints by men. So that is sort of a thing that has backfired on the feminists over in Austria.
I wonder how much the men's party in Austria has to do with all these complaints. I'm pretty sure they're encouraging individuals to file complaints in there just to bankrupt their policies. I'm pretty sure that is the case. And again, I'm not arguing against the decision of the Commission. Yeah, they are correct, but I'm also not so sure that these kinds of, you also read another or similar article with some bar that was employing more women than men because they preferred women to have in there, and another guy sued or whatever, went to this commission, and yes, he won, but you can't really force a bar to employ you or more men because potato.
Yeah, and I don't think it should do that either. But it's sort of useful to point out the stupidity of these laws and of this Equality Commission.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would focus more on equality under the law. Why don't I would love to see someone going to the Equality Commission complaining against the government. Look what you're doing with our pensions. How about address that?
Yeah, but basically the argument there goes that women get paid less, so they pay less into the system, and therefore get less out. So women actually get are discriminated against in terms of pensions because they
get out less because they pay less in the system. So get them to retire at 67, so they'll pay more, so they'll get more into the system from the system.
Basically, the argument is that you can't equalize the pension system until you've gotten rid of the gender pay gap.
Okay. That doesn't make any sense.
Actually, it makes perfect sense if you believe in the gender pay gap.
Ah, I see.
Because
so it still doesn't make any sense.
Fair enough.
Jesus Christ. Again, I agree with the Equality Commission, but I'm not sure it's an issue or such a big issue. Let's go to the next one.
Okay. This one is from Germany, from the Taz.
Oh.
And it's written by Heide Österreich, a well-known feminist. And it's called, in quotes, in scare quotes, Natural Order of the Sexes. And it's about the sort of new political party, AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, which is sort of a Eurosceptic party that's also sort of mildly anti-feminist, or at least not pro-feminist, and we can't have that, of course.
Partly of the politically activated non-feminist sector. I like that. Okay.
At first, it was supposed to be funny. In 2013, the youth organization of the AfD, the Junge Alternative, had their followers post testimonials on Facebook. Quote, "I don't need feminism because a mother is just as valuable as a chairwoman of a board of directors," or "Sometimes I do want to be weak." As trite as it is uninteresting. But now this party is in the EU Parliament and in 3 state parliaments. And in the meanwhile, its feminism bashing has become endemic. With the AfD, bellicose anti-feminism has arrived in democracy. The latent defensiveness against policies which question traditional gender roles is already well known in there. The FDP, in its misunderstood liberalism, has always ignored the worst starting position that women have in professional life and in politics. The Union... What?
Misunderstood liberalism? Come on. Anyway, go ahead, sorry.
The Union, which is the Conservative parties, by no means wants to overdo it with emancipation and puts in the brakes. No quota, childcare subsidy, income splitting, and gender mainstreaming, which seeks to eliminate gender-based disadvantages, has been gently discredited and then put into hibernation mode. But the AfD is different. Quote, "Down with gender madness" is one of their battle cries. In its election program for the European election, the party demands the abolition of gender mainstreaming. The AfD's Spitzenkandidat in Thuringia, Björn Höcke, told the Thüringer Allgemeine, quote, "Pernicious, expensive, tax-financed social experiments with the goal of abolishing the natural order of the sexes should be stopped immediately." How shocking. "Children should once more, quote, be brought up in the family," end quote. New quote. The classical family should once more be the guiding principle, end quote. That sounds very dangerous indeed. I'm going to skip a few paragraphs because it's a quite long article. One reason for this new lack of restraint, the AfD is a men's party. If there were more women, the female guardians of the family would no longer be among themselves, and a discussion about women's policies would develop. And they use the word Frauenpolitik, which is like women's politics or something like that, which I don't really think there's a exact translation for that.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, like female identity politics, basically.
Yes.
But as things stand, as Andreas Kempner tells the tale, the party leadership of the AfD, who obviously didn't care about women's policies at all, asked the party members, when it came to formulating the European election program, whether they should be for or against gender mainstreaming and for or against the quota. 82% of the members were against gender mainstreaming and 93% were against the quota. And so at the federal election...
Just 93%? So that means they have 7% infiltrators in there.
Oh my god.
AfD, clean your backyard. Anyway, sorry for interrupting.
And so at the federal election in 2013, the AfD failed because of the female voters. If only men had been allowed to vote, they would have made it over the 5% threshold, which is what you need to actually get into the Bundestag. If you have less than that, your vote basically doesn't count. How should we evaluate the arrival of anti-feminists in the German party system? Do we have to worry about right-wing men's party, about a right-wing men's party that's sailing on a wave of discontentment? We do. Here, young and old men congregate who are afraid of their gender privilege, or of losing their gender privilege. This group won't just go away. It will be with us for a while. We have to confront them. And the article goes on for a bit more, but I think we've heard enough.
Yeah, you've hit the thrust of the non-argument. What can I say? Alternative für Deutschland sounds like a votable party by this description.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure they're not perfect, but come on.
Sadly, there is exaggerating the anti-feminism of this party quite a bit here. They're sort of mildly anti-feminist and don't really have much in the way of feminist stuff in there. There's a good bit of traditionalism in it and some of the sort of traditional genocentrism, but at least that's preferable to feminism.
Yes, and the fact that I don't know, did they actually say down with the gender mainstreaming and things of that nature? Did they actually say that?
Yeah, it's like that's not the official party. Was getting arrested there. That's not the official party position, but particular members of the party said those things.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with those particular party members, because gender mainstreaming, if we have to just remember, it was essentially a concept developed by an African lady from Senegal, currently the Prime Minister of Senegal. Her name is Aminata Touré. Very hardcore Marxist. She was a member of the Young Bolsheviks of France and things of that nature. So, hardcore Marxist. And she essentially almost single-handedly developed this concept when she was working for the United Nations. And the concept is not really that complicated, but essentially the essence of the argument for gender mainstreaming is something like this: women's healthcare is a human right, men's healthcare is irrelevant. That's essentially gender mainstreaming. Of course, I'm simplifying a lot because I don't have time to go through all the Marxist argument that she puts forth. And yeah, I agree down with that kind of crap because, no.
I guess sort of officially the idea of gender mainstreaming is that you look at the way different things in society impact the sexes disparately, and then you try to rectify that. But in practice, it just means more stuff for women and less for men.
To her credit, Ms. Touré, who developed the concept, is quite honest. I mean, there are UN documents written by her where she essentially says women's healthcare is a human right, men's healthcare doesn't matter. Look for my article written last year on AVFM called Marxist Feminist Prime Minister in Senegal, or something like that is called the article. It's written by me. And I quote her directly in there. No, she's not joking. I mean, and she's honest. I mean, that's what I appreciate of older Marxists. At least they're honest. They say, look, this is what I stand for. Now, in 99.9% of the cases, what they stand for is completely unreasonable and stupid, but at least they're honest. Unlike the modern ones, they're quite honest. And she actually says it, just like that.
Okay,
and,
but I guess that's not sort of the official position of
the EU,
the
definitely
European
not.
Union or the various governments.
No. They just put gender mainstreaming in there, and you have to do the research yourself. But then again, and if AfD didn't even get to the 5% threshold and it's not in the Bundestag, what's her issue with it? It's not a parliamentary party, not yet anyway. So
the reason is that in the very recent elections at the Bundestag,
they got one seat or two. Yeah.
No, they got more than 10% in all the 3 elections. Just in the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
So now it sort of looks like they will probably be in the Bundestag in next election and sort of be at least one of the minor parties that play a role in German politics. And the thing is, I mean, I don't think the AfD is great or anything like that, but at least it's like one party that is not feminist that is in the mainstream, and that is a nice thing to have. And I hope that they at once they sort of become a bit more mainstream, a bit more established, that they don't get infiltrated by the feminists as all parties before have been to a greater or lesser extent. We have to wait and see if that happens, or if they actually manage to sort of develop an actual anti-feminist message, which would be, I think it would even be a good strategy, because it would be sort of a unique selling point, something that differentiates itself from the other parties.
Yeah, and if we look like on politics, like we look on the economic market, the motto should be differentiate or die.
Yeah, because right now in the Bundestag we have 4 factions, 5 parties. All of them are ranging from moderately feminist to extremely feminist. So having an anti-feminist party there would, I think, be actually a good way to get votes, because I think the people who are actually really feminist, they wouldn't want to vote for the AfD anyway. So I don't see a way for them to get those voters.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I don't have the link, but I just remembered in Sweden there was an election this Saturday or this Sunday, and Feministisk Initiative didn't get into the parliament, into the Riksdag.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of crying in the feminist sector because of that aspect.
Very sad.
I guess the Swedish voters just trolled a little bit and put one of them in the European Parliament for fun. But when it came to the real business, no, come on. We can't have that kind of insanity into our Riksdag. We already have enough insanity into our Parliament, because they essentially, in Sweden, they have like 7 or 8 parties, 7 of them overtly feminist and 1 of them non-feminist. who by the way got 14 or 15%, something like that, in this election. It's the party that said we don't believe in affirmative action, which essentially got them a label of Nazism. But anyway, no, seriously,
you're not in favor of affirmative action. You must be in favor of murdering millions of Jews and starting wars and so on.
Yes,
That's the only two possible positions.
Yeah. No false dichotomy in there at all. Absolutely not. It makes perfect sense. Not. Okay, the last one, coming from a blog, Filming in Argentina. I tried to contact the authors to have this piece reprinted on AVFM. They didn't reply. Filminginargentina.wordpress.com, documentary Erasing Dad, censored in Argentina. Censorship is not common in Argentina, I disagree, yet one film has recently become the subject of prior restraint. The documentary Borrando a Papá, Erasing Dad, was originally set to premiere on August 28th, but it was suddenly pulled down at the behest of a non-governmental organization that criticized its release. Production owners why the controversy over a film about divorce? The film denounces the thousands of lawyers and psychologists who live off prolonging conflict in family court cases, states the co-director Ginger Gentile, as well as the organizations that receive subsidies by exaggerating domestic violence statistics. The filmmakers claim that resources are not being used to protect the real victims of domestic violence, but rather to separate fathers whose only crimes have been to speak Russian to their son, or that their mother fears that he will do something, as the two cases in the documentary show. Really? The father might speak Russian to the... Seriously? Come on.
That sounds like domestic abuse. Speaking Russian, that's...
Посаси меня хуй, да. Anyway.
Next thing you know, he will try to annex East Ukraine. I mean,
yeah, they'll try to annex Brazil. Yeah, quote-unquote technical problems were cited for the cancellation of the theatrical premiere of Erasing Dad, but few weeks before this date, an NGO started a petition on Change.org asking for the film to be censored. This NGO and others pressured the Argentine Film Board, INCAA, which funded the film, to not allow it to be premiered. Many of the people asking for censorship were interviewed for the film, where they admit on camera that they do everything possible to prevent fathers from seeing their children. They also want to revert the assumption of innocence in these cases. In the words of one psychologist, quote, "If I say that a father is guilty, he is guilty until he can prove his innocence. We need to change the constitution so that in these types of cases, we need to change the constitution so that in these types of cases, the burden of proof is on the father," end of quote. Oh, so essentially they got some Marxist feminists to be honest. So what's the problem? I mean, don't they want their views to be broadcasted to even more people? We've been doing that a lot on AVFM as well. We broadcast their views to even more people. I mean, come on, everyone wants to see the reasonable feminists talking. Back to the article. After the movie theater premiere was cancelled, the filmmakers arranged a screening open to the public on September the 2nd at the Colegio Público de Abogados, the city law guild, but it was cancelled a few days prior. Technical difficulties were cited, but leaked emails revealed that two government functionaries, including a city congresswoman, had personally asked for the movie's ban, citing its erred focus. The congresswoman, Gladys Gonzalez, has debated with Gentile on the radio, defending her position, and has received a firestorm of criticism on Twitter and Facebook for her views. Gee, I wonder why. This case has since taken to the press, with several media outlets commenting on the issue. They say they don't want to censor the movie just to prevent its exhibition, reported the newspaper Perfil regarding the opposing NGO. That's like saying you don't want a person dead, just want him to stop breathing. Ambito Financiero likened the situation to an act of prior restraint. On the affair, Cine Freaks said a movie's projection shouldn't be censored at the request of those who haven't seen it. It has already helped open up a debate on a long-forgotten issue: fathers. The movie has only grown in popularity and support across social media, both locally and internationally, garnering over 17,000 Facebook likes, over 60,000 trailer views. 30 to 40 fathers suffering contact us a day, as co-director Fernandez Ferreira mentioned in an interview with newspaper La Nación, which has also reported on the strong controversy. This level of media coverage and social media following is unheard of for a small documentary in Argentina. The filmmakers and the protagonists of the film, fathers and experts, have been making rounds on television news shows to talk about not only the censorship but the business behind divorce cases. Lawyers, judges and politicians have also begun to meet with the filmmakers and experts to see how the current system can be modified, as the reaction to the film shows that there is a critical mass of affected families. The support for erasing that is far greater than the people who are against the film. As censorship in Argentina is unpopular, the dictatorship between 77 and 83 banned films and books. Also, many fathers have begun to speak out about a problem that until recently it was a taboo, that they can't see their children after a divorce before the courts do not, because the courts do not enforce visitation or they have been victims of false allegations. In the family court system, accusations are not investigated as they do not go to trial. Rather, the law states that an accusation by the mother must result in the father being removed from the home for 90 days. While the movie focuses on Argentina, it demonstrates the issue is worldwide. Recently, Hollywood film star Jason Patrick, I don't know, has raised awareness of parental alienation, educating the public and starting an NGO to help families in this situation called Stand Up for Gus. Article 14 in the Constitution of Argentina states that all the nation's inhabitants have the right to publish their ideas without prior restraint. Gentile said, quote, it's weird for me as a filmmaker to see reviews of my movies by people who haven't even seen it yet. Whilst Borando a Papai, Raising Dad, remains unreleased, its directors continue to negotiate for its eventual exhibition in movie theaters and confirm that many organizations are coming forward to offer alternative screening venues. When it premieres, it is sure to keep making waves in the family court system by its claim that children have the right to love both of their parents. That's an extreme claim. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that does sound like right-wing extremism and basically Nazism.
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, no, seriously, what the hell is wrong? I mean, they got some feminists to be honest. What's wrong with that? Hey, come on, they should want to have their views broadcast to even more people.
But it's not censorship. It's just preventing the film from being seen.
I like that journalist's analogy. You don't want a person dead, you just want them to stop breathing.
I don't even think that's an accurate analogy. I mean, what they're describing is literally censorship.
It is.
Preventing the film from being shown. That's censorship. That's what censorship means.
Amazing. Okay, since we had the last news of from a Spanish-speaking country, and we'll read an article originally written in Spanish, so let's listen to some Spanish music. Metal band from Spain, Los 400 Golpes. We'll listen to a song from the 2013 album Arrastrado a la Ciénaga. The name of the song is Aquel Lugar Sin Nombre, or The Nameless Place. So Los 400 Golpes, The Nameless Place. And we're back. We've listened to the Spanish band Los Cuatrocientos Golpes, the Nameless Place, great band from Spain. I suggest looking for them. Most of their albums are available for free, perfectly legal under Creative Commons licensing process. Very good band out there. We're into the second part of the show where we'll start dealing with this thing. Is feminism essentially exported globally through I hate to say conspiracy, but the word conspiracy, even though it has been demonized lately, we have to remember our history is filled with conspiracies. But anyway, before I get into reading the article in question, just going to announce the opening of the call-in lines. The call-in number is 001-214-272-0408. I'll repeat, 001-214-272-0408. And from the US, 214-272-0408. To get the discussion going, I'm going to start reading this article using my not so great Spanish, but anyway. Article published on AVFM en español. Microcréditos para sacar a las mujeres de la pobreza y justificaciones para excluir a los hombres. Microcredits to lift women out of poverty and the justifications to exclude men. In 2008, the microloans were considered to be the most innovative remedy to lift people out of poverty, but they also had a gender angle. These loans were granted only or almost exclusively to women, as they were considered to be more responsible than men in management and investment. The initial success of the program led the global institutions to believe that they had not just achieved a method of eradicating poverty, but they have also proved the gender ideology that they have been arguing for quite some time, i.e. that women were not people like men with faults and virtues, but morally superior beings, and if the oppression of the latter would be curbed, then they could make the world a fairer and better place for all. If women ruled the world, there would be no wars, as they say. The crisis of the microfinance institutions from the year 2010, as well as other data that I will bring along in this article, would end this enthusiasm and reveal that the gender dynamics involved was not exactly like it had been sold. But don't misunderstand me. In any case, I am glad that this initiative has failed, but the facts that have brought out the true colors of those who support gender discrimination based on the demonization of the male sex. Here I will quote some paragraphs that reveal how gender ideology behaves when it is thought that its theses have been undeniably confirmed, and how it is used to vilify and discriminate against the male sex. The article is entitled "Why is it better to give money to women?" and was published as usual in El País. I really recommend reading it in full because it is a statement of principles. So let's begin. Quote, "When the loan enters a family through the woman, the benefits go directly to the welfare of the whole family. Children go to school, eat better, the roof is fixed. When it enters through the man, there are too many chances that it ends in liquor," added Daly Harris. The same argument is put forth by Rozanek Zafar, a fellow at Yunus and president of the Kashfe Foundation in Bangladesh, who benefited from 260,000 microcredits. If a woman earns $1, she spends 70% on the family. A man spends merely 30%. The truth is that I sought this information and I have not found it anywhere. But to vilify the man, facts are never needed because everything bad that is said of him will always be more, or at least sound more credible than the contrary. The argument with liquor is so sexist that it's like saying you should not give money to women because they'll spend them on bags and shoes. And now let's continue with more gender chauvinism. When Muhammad Yunus launched in 1976 with only $27 the idea of Bank for the Poor, he noted that the first thing Bangladeshi women did when they had this income was to recover their children from the homes of the rich where they were working in exchange for food. Secondly, they sent them to school. They are better fighters against poverty than men, says Yunus. The discovery earned him a Nobel Prize in 2006, and 30 years later it is said that the program has lifted 60 million people out of poverty. They are the poorest of the poor. They are desperate to properly care for their children, and they are not really and they are the best fighters for their children in times of crisis. They have more reasons to get out of poverty, says Muhammad Yunus. The delinquency rate for women is almost non-existent because the lives of their children is at stake. I saw a group push through an entire population riding a business selling shampoos, says Pilar Gomez Acebo, honorary president of the Federation of Women Entrepreneurs involved in gender cooperation projects. What a misleading name. Of course, United Nations and the Spanish government, amongst others, joined the current while the popularity of these initiatives was at its peak. Quote, helping more women gives better results, and Spain has embraced this doctrine as it will lead to more gender cooperation. 3 decades later, the intuition of Muhammad Yunus, the man who decided that 95% of the beneficiaries of his bank to be poor women, has become a universal principle governing the development aid policies of organizations such as the United Nations or the World Bank. Quote, equality between men and women is the key to effective, efficient, and sustainable policies for addressing poverty, says the Declaration of the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations. Spain aims to champion this new approach to developmental aid. Vice President Maria Teresa Fernandez de la Vega announced the third Hispanic African meeting of women in Spain, which will promote the creation of a fund of the UN gender equality policies to finance such initiatives. In this term, the government has increased the funding 400% for cooperation aimed at women, and Spain is the third donor to the Microcredit fund in the world after the World Bank and Germany. We are already the largest donor in UNIFEM, that is the Development Fund for Women in the United Nations, says Secretary of State for Cooperation Leire Pahin. The most difficult and the most diffuse part is what has been named as the empowerment of women. In the case of Spain, we are supporting local women's associations such as Las Diñas or The Worthy in El Salvador, an association against gender violence. Now, for those of you who are new, I would refer you back to the episodes called The Spanish Model and The Male Health. Those are 2 episodes in the Voice of Europe where we discussed the Spanish feminist model, and we even had a Spanish feminist on the show talking more about how they implemented that kind of thing in Spain and what an utter failure it was. So what they mean by gender violence is essentially all men are bad, all women are victims. Something to that effect. Anyway, back to the article. What we did not anticipate is that 2 years later, the IMF entered into a profound crisis around the world, including in Nicaragua, Bolivia, Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Morocco. What had happened? The explanations are many, but we could simplify the issue as one of mismanagement by both the microloans finance institutions and their clients, who were mostly women. Nothing in principle is gender specific, since women can manage loans as well or as badly as men. In what ways the media reacted related to the microfinance in this situation? Well, if before the crisis they were talking about business women geniuses, now it was treating the issue as if the sex of the borrowers had not played any role. There was even some blaming of the men in the media for the failure of the project, such as this Bloomberg article entitled "Suicides in India Reveal How Men Made the Microcredits a Disaster." However, the content of the article does not explain at all why men are responsible, and it is more revealing of the ideological desires of their authors than any observable reality. If men are to blame for the crisis of microcredits, it could only be due to 2 reasons, either because men control the IMF or because although women actually make the loans, it is men who actually manage the money. In both cases, if we are to attribute the failure of these initiatives to men, it would be equally fair to do so with their successes as well. However, what they're trying to say is that the success of these microfinance institutions should be attributed to women and failures should be attributed to men. I could not find the data on the number of female employees in the IMF, but here's what I have found. For Bangladesh, where Muhammad Yunus concentrated his efforts, it was found that only 17% of the women maintained absolute control over their loans. The research of anthropologist Lamia Karim data revealed even more dramatic. 95% of Bangladeshi women receiving microloans gave their money to their husbands or their other male relatives. The numbers are similar in India, where only 18% of women had obtained complete control of microcredit loans. It seems, therefore, that men had something to do with the initial miracle of microfinance and lifting 6 million people out of poverty with Yunus program, but also with the subsequent crisis in the sector. When we continue to explore the data, however, the picture becomes more complicated. While only 17% of women in Bangladesh and 18% in India had full control over the microloans, 21% and 16% respectively had no control. In the other cases, which are the majority, we would find a shared task by the couple with various degrees of control over the funds. In short, as in any other country, women manage the money in some households, whilst in others the man does, and there is a shared responsibility in the rest of them. Similarly, the success and failures of microcredit should not, and as data shows, is not gender-specific. In India, as elsewhere, the microcredit model included the creation of women's groups that theoretically serve to motivate each other and exert pressure, as well as so that each and one of them meet their obligations. But this strategy became a double-edged sword when some women found that they could stop paying the loan and that the government would give them their support. It was then that these groups became such information networks that spread like wildfire, and soon the entire district of Andhra Pradesh refused to pay, causing a crisis of serious proportions. The belief that women were responsible for the good outcomes and had nothing to do with the bad ones flew in the face of reality, and as a result the IMF decided to have a more diverse clientele with a similar number of men and women. In short, they would start to lend to people, not just women. Initially, it seems that it took a huge crisis that the IMF, that the microloans finance institutions realized that the belief in the innate feminine honesty was as serious as the belief in the innate male error. But it seems that the empowerment of women had actually been an excuse to lend money. The director of the field, Basix, even declared that they preferred to lend to women because they did not negotiate as much as men. That is possibly believed because the women they encountered were more docile or easily intimidated. The big problem, however, is the belief that women are more responsible than men in administering the money and the food, and it is still one of the dogmas of the governments that the UN and other international organizations in areas of poverty and during a humanitarian crisis. An example can be seen in this article, offensively titled "Are Men Useless? The Government Says So," in an article published in the New York Times, and the booklets are explaining how food in India will now be given to women who for this purpose shall be considered as head of households. Before this, the head of the family was designated by the members of the family and not by the state. The Indian government's decision is based on studies that declare women as more responsible in managing food, conveniently ignoring research that found no difference, such as the study made by Harris in 1990. This reminds us of the numerous reports that had quote-unquote proven something similar in the case of microfinance, but ignoring the internal dynamics of families. In fact, the article itself mentions the microloans as part of the argument to give the goodies to women exclusively, as if the crisis in the sector had not revealed that the gender research was a fraud. It is also significant on a symbolic level, rather than just giving women the booklets of the goodies. It is required that there now be called head of household, at least in those documents, which seems aimed at undermining the perceived traditional male role for unclear reasons. Finally, as the title of the article in the New York Times would have been possible, as it is the case in El País, when they believe that their ideology finally has a clear argument to vilify the men and exalt the women, they show their true colors. The article has a few more paragraphs that anyway. So, does this really surprise anyone?
Not really. I mean, we knew for quite a long time that the international organizations have these sort of policies where they just focus on women, just to give women things in because feminism. And really that there hasn't been any sort of public outrage about that is really, really telling. It shows how how far feminism has already seeped into the mainstream. Even though most people are not feminists, they don't call themselves feminists, they still accept these sort of things.
And quite frankly, I don't think most people even agree with these kinds of things. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if this article that I just read would be translated in English and published on, I don't know, the Washington Post, I would think that most people would be outraged. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would wager on that.
Yeah, I guess the thing with these policies of giving aid to women instead of to everyone is a thing that if you ask the average person on the street, like should you give aid only to men or only to women or to both equally, then almost everyone would say to both equally. But when they say we just give it to women because women are more responsible and so on, then most people actually probably sort of accept that. They don't really say it's great, but they say it sort of makes sense maybe.
I'm just gonna digress a little bit and mention that the policies of aid in general, there is a stronger and stronger case as more research emerges that they're essentially harming the place more than it helps overall. And just looking at the internal research that Habitat for Humanity made, they eventually withdrew from some third world places because they noticed that they're harming the place more than it helps. I mean, yeah, of course, they build homes for poor people. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for starters, it undermines the local workforce, which essentially loses a chance of upward mobility. That would be one of the things that,
Yeah, the thing is that it is really, really difficult to do charity effectively because you just completely skew the incentives that would be otherwise there. Like if you just go to a poor neighborhood and start handing out $100 bills to random passers-by, then sure, you help those people you give $1 to, but soon enough there will be lots of people there fighting for access to get to those dollars, and people wasting hours and hours queuing for those dollars, and sort of in equilibrium, you're not really making those people better off. They're just spending about $100 worth of time to get those $100. So helping effectively is really, really difficult, and most sort of aid organizations they don't really actually help people in the long run.
And I don't even want to hear this argument. I mean, charity in developed nations to help the individuals who have fallen through the cracks, that can be more effective because overall the economy is stronger and whatnot. But in the less developed nations, that's not really helpful, and I know that firsthand. Because I've done some NGO work in the only third world. There is only one third world country in Europe. It's called Republic of Moldova, and I've been there, of course. Essentially in places where Romanian charities or Romanian, Bulgarian, Russian charities have came, even some Ukrainian charities have come, and in the small cities, small towns where those have come before the businesses have come and before the place had developed a decent economy following the fall of the USSR, it essentially on the long run over the course of 10 years let's say it fucked up the place because it essentially destroyed the incentives for one to help out himself or herself and to essentially start doing some productive work.
Yeah, really the only sustainable way of development is really building up the economy, investing money and resources, building up capital goods, educating people and so on. That's really the only way of doing that, and doing that through charity is very difficult.
And the funny part is that I would agree, and I think it's actually quite the best trade-off in this one. Just give micro loans and essentially incentivize the individual to start a business and then pay back the loans, and that actually helps to the upward mobility, provided that it's made on more how do I put it, more sane principles. Such as, exactly. For instance, is the individual likely to be solvable, that is, to pay the loan back, and of course help himself or herself in the process. That would be a sane criterion, as opposed to the criterion, does the individual have a vagina?
Yeah, and I mean, it's certainly possible that sex plays a role in how likely people are going to be in paying back loans. I mean, I don't know, it might even be true that women are more likely to pay back loans, but that should at most be like one factor among many. You should look at, how much income does this person make, does he or she have any sort of other debts, things like that. But, I mean, sex is not a very useful, or at least not nearly as useful a determining factor there.
And especially cannot, in a sane world, be the only factor, because that's the problem with this microfinancing, microcredit program. It was essentially the only factor. Go ahead. I
guess sort of the problem is that when you have these very low credit sums, it doesn't really pay you to make a lot of spend a lot on research and looking at how reliable is this person. So you sort of need easy rules of thumb to determine is this person creditworthy or not. You can't really, like, if you're loaning someone $100, you can't spend $50 looking into how creditworthy is this person. It has to be a really cheap test. And I guess looking at the China is a very cheap test, but I don't think it's reliable enough. There has to be something more efficient than that.
Yes, but again, considering that I've been in at least one third world nation, I would argue that there are ways to verify the creditworthiness of an individual, even without spending large amounts of money, or even without spending money at all. I mean, if you are in a in a small village, as it's usually the case, you can just ask around. Believe it or not, there is always in every single village one or two individuals who know everything about everyone in the village. There's always that case. And it doesn't cost. It costs 50 cents to have a coffee with that individual. And they'll tell you.
Yeah, but it also costs time.
Yeah, it does cost time, but again, when it's done by a charity with volunteers, well, they already do have time. And again, this Yunus individual began with his own money and whatnot. Okay, his money, his business. But the moment you involve the taxpayer with large amounts of money, and involve Germany, involve Spain, I would guess that I would wager that the responsibilities on the loaners are different than when it's a private bank or a private charity who uses its own money or its own resources.
Yeah,
because if this program had been done by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I wouldn't give a flying fuck what he does with his money. I would still disagree, but I wouldn't care that much. I mean, his money, his laws. But the moment you involve the taxpayer, that sends a different message, and it also should. Maybe I'm too extremist in this, but it also should provide a different responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. It should do that, but actually it's often the other way around. Because then you're just getting basically other people's money and you don't really care about that as much as if you're putting up your own money.
Yeah. And the problem that I see is that this kind of situation is not the first and unfortunately not the last. And this is really a question. I still don't have an answer, and we'll probably ask this question in many shows to come. What drives these global institutions to export such a toxic ideology that is not only toxic socially, but it's toxic financially. It brings essentially everyone to be worse off than before, because everyone is hurt by this kind of crap. No matter where they live, the German and the Spanish taxpayer is hurt. The men in those countries are hurt. The individual women are at first helped, but then on the long run they are also worse off than before. Everyone is hurt on by these kinds of initiatives, which are essentially founded on wrong principles.
Yeah, I don't know if the women are actually worse off. Like if they get money, they don't have to pay it back because it's like not really enforced, and maybe it doesn't really in some cases help them in the long run, because some of them may just spend that money on things that don't improve their situation long term, but at least in the short term it still helps them.
Yeah, on the short term, definitely there is an improvement for the individual women who get those particular loans, or should I better say handouts, since they don't pay them back. Definitely on the short run there is an improvement. But I would argue that on the long run, not only there is not an improvement, but they're worse off, because they spend valuable time that they could have spent in a more efficient, and they would have, not just they would have, but they could have, they would have spent on a more productive way, because, you know, when you're hungry, you have to do something to be productive. I mean, for instance, in the example of the article, they pulled their children who are working to a productive job because, well, now there's free money. Well, that job might not be there when the money runs out. So that means on the long run, you're worse off, because you might have the difficult time to get back into employment and things of that nature. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen, of course, if the money is spent unwisely, but I mean, if you're going to use that argument, then anything you do that improve the situation could also worsen your situation, because like if you win $1 million in the lottery, you might waste it on something that's not useful. I mean, I don't really get that argument.
No, but when you do it on more, how do I put it, on saner principles, such as, you know, checking at least summary the solvability of the individual, the chances of a worse outcome on the long run are smaller. I'm not saying they're null, they're not, definitely, but they're smaller. However, when you use defective criteria such as does the individual have a vagina or not, the chances of a worse outcome increase by far. Now again, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. But this is by far the worst trade-off that the United Nations could come up with.
I'm not sure about that. I think actually, like, if you could just costlessly, like, if there were no queuing costs or distribution costs or something, and you could just like give poor people money, that would be an excellent way of reducing poverty, because then poor people know best what are the things that they need most. Whereas if you have outside aid organizations providing help in kind, then that might not be the things that these people need most urgently. So and I think that if people use that money on their own initiative, you know, you do sometimes get people who just spend it on booze or whatever, but I think the waste there is less than if you have organizations providing aid in kind.
Yeah, but as far as I understand, and I read the links provided by Mr. Rodriguez in this article that I just read, as far as I understand in there, it was essentially working like a bank, you know, and I don't know if you ever had a business loan. But essentially, then that's how it works in Europe. And I'm pretty sure that, as far as I understood from those sources, it worked in a similar manner. You would go there and say, look, I want to sell shampoos. And, I need $50 to buy the first 2 dozen pieces of shampoo, and then I'm gonna make $70 from selling them, and then I'm gonna reinvest 60 of those $70 back into shampoos and things of that nature. I mean, essentially, the individual would choose the way to spend that loan. It was essentially the individual came up with the idea. It's not like the organization came in and said, "Look, here's shampoos, start selling them," and then the individual would be like, "But I know nothing about shampoos. I don't give a crap about them. I mean, how would I sell them? I don't know how much a bottle of shampoo costs. I mean, we use classical soap in here. I have no idea what this is, or things of that nature."
Yeah, that is a good point, and that is why I do think that in principle the microloans is a good idea. It's just that this gender nonsense is being brought into it, and that's ruining the whole thing.
Yeah, and what shocks me quite a lot is that have you seen? I mean, Germany is the second worldwide donor on this. Have you seen any headlines about this debacle in the German press?
No. No idea, and I also had no idea that Germany is like the second largest donor there. It's just now that I'm reading it today.
Yeah. I mean, why isn't this more popularized? I mean, Germany being the second largest donor, I would imagine that's quite a fuck ton of money involved in there. Taxpayers' money.
Yeah, and I mean, I had in the last couple of years read a bunch of stuff about the microloans, but it was mostly when things were still going well, and I was never actually read about the whole gender angle there. It was never mentioned. It was just, giving, small loans to poor people, not to poor women.
Okay. Do we have a call?
Have you actually given out the call-in number?
Yes, I did. Multiple times. Also in the chat, and I also said it. Let's have a quick music break, and by the way, the call-in lines are open. Let's listen to some metal from France. Holy Pain, All Those Devils. And we're back. We've listened to Holy Pain, All Those Devils, great metal band from France. We have 12 minutes left, and Iron John has joined us. Iron John, take it from here, because we're tight on time.
Yes, thanks, and hello again to the audience and the hosts at the Voice for Europe. I had an interesting idea about these microloans. I was wondering, do you have any information on is there any information on whether or not these lending agencies, how much profit they're making on these loans?
The information definitely exists. I don't have it.
Oh, I see. Well, I thought it might be just a way for money lenders to get more money. I mean, you lend them some money here, you lend them some money there. Eventually, they figure, well, these people have a lot of money, I'll go borrow even more. And then, they get stuck in a cycle of taking out loans and repaying loans, and then eventually the lenders own them for a very long time. The famous saying that debt is slavery.
Yes, but according to the article that I just read and the evidence he put forth, Mr. Rodriguez, in there, essentially there were entire districts of India, and an entire district of India is pretty much like the population of Austria, decided to stop paying altogether. So I'm not really sure they made much of a profit, considering the fact that they granted the loans on fucked up principles.
Right. Well, in that case, I might have an alternative theory as to what was going on and why it was happening. This may have been an attempt to get a foothold into domestic, I suppose, relations, you could call it. These people who are offering the loans may then turn around after the loan is complete and say, look, women, see, look how bad men are. It's so bad that we have to give women money. And then they'll turn around and say, well, this isn't enough. Clearly, look how small it was. We have to give them even more. And then that cycle continues.
That sounds more credible. That sounds very credible. And it is very consistent with what the Yunus Foundation, who started all this nonsense in '76, it is consistent with the Yunus Foundation's ideology and the ways of looking at things. But I guess my question to this, and that's what I asked right after I finished reading the article, what drives so many people and so many officials to do this? What drives them? What is the motivation to concoct these kinds of conspiracies? And come on, this is a conspiracy. Right in front of everyone. Go ahead, Jon.
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think that Iron John's theory is all that likely. I don't think there's some sort of master plan behind all of this. I do think that this Yunus guy is actually just trying to help poor people, and he does have maybe a warped understanding of gender issues, but I don't think he's a sort of sinister mastermind trying to re-engineer gender relations or something like that.
Well, not he necessarily. I mean, you're probably correct that he has a warped understanding of gender issues, but he's not necessarily an evil person. Most likely he's not. But the agencies that have took over his ideas and implemented it as an official dogma of the UN and various governments across Europe and the world, I'm not really sure that those are as well intended as Mr. Yunus.
I guess they just think that this microfinance is a neat idea and is something that is marketable, and that and the whole gender angle. Of course, we all know that these organizations are infested by feminists. So I don't really see that there's anything grand to explain. I think it's just a natural process. It's this innovative way of helping the poor, and most of the older ways have failed. So you need to try new new strategies, and this is just convenient. I don't see anything big that needs to be explained here.
John?
Well, another possibility might be that this is self-aggrandizement for the people making the microloans. Like, I'm sure we all remember that Twitter thing, the White House thing, the bring our girls back, look at what a wonderful person I am.
Definitely, that's definitely part of it.
It could be the beginning of requests for more and more and more support, so they get to play the hero. And who has ever gone wrong trying to help women and girls?
Oh, so you're essentially saying that the drive behind all this is vanity?
Yeah, could very well be. I mean, we've seen this stuff before. We know that the white knights and the manginas are trying to get approval from women, approval from society, and how do they do it?
By appealing to women's vanity.
I think that's almost certainly at least part of the explanation.
Well,
So,
the motives are...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. I was going to say that there are so many possible motives here that I think the likelihood of a noble purpose here is pretty low. I mean, it's possible, but I think that there are so many things, so many vices that could be exploited by doing something like this that it's hard for me to really see it any other way.
I mean, that there's also a great many people involved in this. There's not really just one motivation, but there's many different people involved, and some maybe go for this for purely selfish reasons. They want to aggrandize themselves. Others maybe are completely altruistic. They really just think that this is the most efficient way of helping the poor. There's, I think, a great diversity of different reasons why different people support this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's possible. It could be something similar to what we had in the United States. These campaigns, these organizations to cure breast cancer or other types of cancer, the race for the cure. I'm not singling out any one organization, but there's an entire industry devoted for curing cancer that affects only women. Now, what we learned here in the last, 5 years or so, is that most of the money raised doesn't actually go to funding cures for cancer. It goes to fund these organizations. And they are very large. They involve lots of people. Some of them may be good, some of them may be bad.
And most of them may be useless. I mean, I'm thinking of the Coney thing, which also essentially raised a fuck ton of money to raise more awareness. I mean, it didn't really help.
What
anyone.
was it actually for? I saw that thing everywhere, but I never actually learned what it was actually for.
Essentially, there is an individual who leads a gang of thugs somewhere at the border between Uganda and I'm sorry, I forgot the other nation. It's called the LRA, the Liberation Republic Army, or something like that. And they're essentially doing quite a fuck ton of bad things in there, essentially terrorizing the local population and recruiting child soldiers and things of that nature. And the campaign was essentially to raise money to aid at apprehending the individual who leads these things and essentially dismantle his organization. Now, I don't question the goal. The goal was definitely worthy. However, the campaigners essentially raised that money, and the money went into producing a film about it and raised more awareness, and it didn't really fund some kind of military or some other form of boots on the ground organizing to actually achieve the goal, which is to dismantle the LRA and apprehend this individual.
Okay.
Yes, I've heard of similar things in the United States after September 11th, something which was horrible for our country, and I'm sure horrible for people outside of the United States to learn about and experience. There was a very famous humanitarian organization called the Red Cross, who solicited donations from the public in order to try to help fund a campaign to help, the survivors of this horrible attack and their families and the first responders who were working. But what happened was something even beyond imagination. They took all the money that they collected from the donors, and they spent it on something other than aid relief for the 9/11 cause. So while on one hand, yes, it was certainly something that was in the right place, people's hearts who were giving, the people who were collecting ultimately were irresponsible. And of course, that's an element.
Okay, the wall of death is approaching. So what essentially I'm hearing with these examples is that never suspect a conspiracy when pure stupidity or vanity could explain it better. Am I right?
I would not call it a conspiracy has sort of an ominous tone to it. I know that the official definition is two or more people meeting in private to commit a crime. I'm not sure if you'd necessarily call it a crime. I would call it just human nature on display. Yeah.
Okay, then with that being said, we really have to wrap it up. Tomorrow there's on the frequencies of AVFM radio Tales from the Infrared at noon Central Time, if I remember correctly. That is 6 p.m. Britain time. Thanks a lot, John, for calling. Thanks a lot, Jon, for being here. That being said, take the red pill.
This has been a production of A Voice for Man. Lucian Wilson and his guests, thank you for listening to The Voice of Europe. A Voice for Men radio is not corporate media and everything runs on donations. So please consider visiting avoiceformen.com and make a donation. We would also like to thank the artists De Prima Terra, Bezna, Cristian Buica, the Iranian band Arsames, the DDG Project, and all the other artists that offered us their songs to use under Creative Commons license. Special thanks go to www.pacdv.com/sounds for putting the sounds of the jingles at our disposal. We would also want to remind the listeners to take the red pill. Thank you for listening to us and have a great evening. Ați ascultat Vocea Europei.